Today we're talking all about differences between a belted slide or a string slide. And why you might choose a belted slide or a strung slide over another for lifting your mechanisms off the ground. Let's compare the speeds between the two. Realistically, although it looks like the belt slide goes up a little bit faster, it goes down a little bit slower. The string slide goes up a little bit slower, but comes down a little bit faster. Just depends on what your tensions are between the systems. So why might you consider a belt slide versus a string slide? If we look at the design between the two, in terms of compactness, they're about the same, honestly. If I were to measure from the bottom of my system, from the top of my system here, on my belt slide, I'm sitting at about 54 centimeters to the top, whereas on my strung slide, I'm sitting at about 51 centimeters to the top. Reason for that main discrepancy on these two designs is this one's using an M4 screw, whereas this is using an M3. So if you redesign this to use an M4 with your idlers, you would be about the same amount of height. When we look at the reach between the two, the reach is the exact same. Despite on this setup making it look like the red's going faster, it's because this endpoint here is a little bit further past this endpoint. So we're talking about pros about a belt slide here. You're gonna have a bit more strength and a bit more load capacity on these. That's gonna be a little bit more reliable using a belt slide because you're less likely to slip a pulley. That happens quite a bit on strung slides. You can have your string, you can lose off of a pulley, especially if something too big. You're also gonna have less stretch or less maintenance on a belt slide because these things are neoprene rubber with fiberglass strands inserted. They're not gonna stretch near as much as string will. If you use a proper string, something like Kevlar, you're not really gonna get much string on these systems, but compared to a belt, it's just really no comparison. Another nice thing about belt slides is they're significantly easier to rig up than string slides are. String slides, typically students really struggle with trying to get the proper tension on a system here. That can be quite challenging. Because of its higher load capacity, it's easier maintenance and it's easier build. Most of the time, I recommend a belt slide. The one thing that a belt slide tends to do worse in is its routing. So with my belt slide, I had to be basically bang on with the straightness of my design here. So if you're not designing this up in CAD, it can be really challenging to make sure that your belt is straight in line with everything else. Whereas on a string slide, you can be a little bit more forgiving with lefts and rights. Another benefit of a string slide versus a belt slide is with a belt slide, you would have some sort of power transfer mechanism if you want to mount your motor not in line. So if I wanted to mount this perpendicular, I'd have to have some sort of power transfer to be able to get over here. Whereas on a string, I could easily mount my motor perpendicularly and my string will continue to go through the pulleys without that having to worry. Although you can move your motor to different places on your belt, you are more restricted in where your motor is allowed to go on a belt slide versus where your motor can go in a string slide. So on a string slide, you could go here, you could go here, you go realistically anywhere along the chain, and you can just extend the length of your string. It's a lot easier. It's a lot more challenging to do on a belt. In most cases, I would go with belt slide. It's a lot easier to rig up. It's a lot easier to maintain. It's a lot easier to build, but you need to have a lot more precise placement where your motor goes. So if you find you cannot place your motor in a specific orientation, you may find that a string slide is better for you. For both these builds, I'll have both of these CAD designs down below. I hope to help you out with choosing between a belted slide or a strung slide, and best of luck on your next project.